dev dash setup tree.
Okay.
RPM dev is one word. Is everybody else keeping up? We will?
Space. No space.
No space.
No space.
Oh, it's just all say that.
And then setup, and then just hit tab.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, there it is. Gotcha.
Cool. All right, so as soon as Mark gets caught up, we'll continue on. Does anybody have any questions at this point about setting up the GPG key or the build tree? Anything cool like that? No? All right, good. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to create a small script that will package up. All right, so Mark's got up, sweet. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our test file. That should say test-01 or 1.0-1. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this file. So if you guys want to go ahead and follow along with that, what's up on the screen, let me know when you're done. And I'm going to cheat because I already got
Should there be a
it.
space between your double, smaller than you work? Oh, it has to be right now.
No, I copied and pasted this right from my screen. It'll work.
I don't care.
So what this is going to do is it's going to basically when you run the file, it's going to say hello, the date and time is, and it's going to run the date command. Right? So that's all this file does. It's a really simple file.
That's a backtick, right?
Yep, that is a backtick. So these guys here, because you found them right up near your escape key, that's a backtick.
You did not set up the file file, provide CHH and all that stuff. Let's see which one of that file.
And if you notice down here, even though the directory we made is test-1.0, I put a dash in down here when we create the tar file because this is release 1. Okay, so thinking the RPM naming format where it has name, version, release. This name is test, 1.0 is the version, release 1. So make sure you have that you name your tar file properly, otherwise it won't work.
Can you encourage to put enter after the end of the line?
Yeah, just hit enter. Okay, and it says those are the files that packaged up.
Oh, God, okay, it's tar.
All right, and then the last thing you want to do is just copy that tar file that you just made into your RPM build / sources directory. And again, that's part of the tree that we created when we created our user account. We ran the RPM dev - setup tree command.
So you're doing, full hard path.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that, I'm sure.
No, just like the paths. Personal preference.
I don't have.
Oh, you misspelled sources. Yes. All right.
It doesn't like services.
Just might have one of the sodas here. Just a tab and chance of you spelling it wrong.
You're
that's,
going to root temp from there, right?
No, well, what I did was I tried staging a bunch of stuff last night. And it's apparently gone. So, let me see where I'm at. 1, 2, 170. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and copy those same files that you guys just created over to my computer. Yes.
Hey, Ted, what are you doing?
I'm trying to copy over some files.
Can you throw us back on that last slide then?
Yeah.
Hey Ted,
Yeah.
is the Fedora draft documentation packager's guide an accurate reflection of this? All that's captured in there?
Yes.
Okay. So if anybody Googles for
We got
Fedora
references.
packager's guide.
All right. So,
Now, the packager guide is a work in progress. It's not perfect yet, but we accept patches. We like lots of feedback on it.
Tell me anything open source that is complete and finished.
No, this is actually being actively worked on. But still has some few rough edges, so
Looks pretty good.
it really is pretty good. They've done a good job.
Let's see if I can do a little work on it. I've been writing transition plans for proposals the last few days. Brain is fried.
so what happened, just so you guys know, is I actually had some stuff that I copied over into my temp directory. And inside the VM. And for whatever reason, it decided to go away. So I'm just copying some stuff back over. All right. All right. Was everybody good with that page? All right. Good deal. All right, so now if I go into my RPM build directory, and I go into sources, what I should see is that tar file that we made is in there. And if I back up and I go into specs, the next thing we're going to create is our spec file. So there used to be a way that you could type in vi whatever .spec and it would give you a default spec file. They got rid of that. So now what you do is you type in RPM dev, new spec, and then your spec file. you'd want to name yours test. I'm going to name mine test 2 because I already have a test spec file in here. But when you run that command, it returns saying it was created, RPM version is greater than or equal 4.10. And when you open up the test 2 spec file, because it added .spec to the end of that, you will see that it's already set up with the preamble area, description, the prep, where it figures out how to unpackage tar files and stuff, and then does your build and your configure and your install. So all of that is there. Here's where you put documentation files, RNA doc, the change log. If you have configuration files, those would go in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and display my actual test.spec file. So you guys can start editing yours to look like this one.
Is it possible to make a multi-distro RPM?
A multi-distro RPM, possibly. I mean, you'd have to
Let's
probably
say-
rebuild it for each distro.
Let's say I want, yeah, instead of creating 2 RPMs for 2 different distros, if I wanted to create one RPM that'll work on both, say Red Hat and who else was Mandriva, for instance, is that possible?
It is possible, they just give you like, they don't actually specify it's for Red Hat or Mandriva, they just give you
It's
a generic, but
very possible in theory. In practice, it becomes very, very difficult. I mean,
Yeah, 'cause
SUSE
you're-
tries to do this with their packages that they create an open build service. The problem is that different distributions name their libraries differently, that different distributions, even though they're using RPM, use different dependency solvers. There's a number of different reasons why in practice it doesn't work well, even though in theory it should.
Okay.
Some of the file system trees are different.
Yeah.
Well, that's.
For example, the SUSE RPM things
just call it-
have additional headers that,
Test.spec.
the Red Hat doesn't use, it doesn't know about, those sorts of things. So
It's more work than it's work.
it's more work than it's worth, yes. Most
Although it would be elegant if you could.
definitely. Yep.
Yeah. There's a couple things I want to point out about the spec file here. The first thing you'll notice is when you opened up your spec file, you probably saw a configure command down here around the build area. I took that out. It's been known to cause problems in the past. Even if you comment it out, it'll cause problems. So I just take it out. Unless, of course, I'm using a tar file that requires me to do a configuration command on the tar file to set up the rest of it so it'll be able to be compiled properly. We're not doing that with ours because, again, our file is just a simple script that returns the time and date. So you can take out the configure thing. Also, we're not going to be running any make commands, so you can either comment out or remove the make commands. Because, again, we're not actually building, our tar file is just a script. It doesn't need to be built, it doesn't need to be compiled, so we don't need configure or make commands in our spec file. So you can either comment them out or remove them, but definitely remove the configure one. Yeah, just remove that whole line. Configure.
There's nothing under install. There's nothing under.
Oh yeah, there's stuff under install. Everybody ready for me to scroll down a little bit? Another thing is up here under build requires and requires, I put in files, right? What I could do is I could come up here under requires and even build requires, because these files all come from the same package. I could just put in core utils. So as long as the core utils package is installed, this RPM will install.
you don't have to specify?
No.
If you had to specify, could you specify? So if you had like so if core utils 1 would break it, whereas core util 2
Yeah, I
would.
could sit there and say core utils has to be greater than a certain version or has to be equal to a certain version.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that. But the core utils package, it's been out for a long time. Those commands.
I mean, I'm just saying
Yeah,
in
so
general,
core
if I wanted like
Yeah.
not core utils, it's something
Yeah,
else.
if you wanted to. So what Jeff was talking about is doing something like this. Core utils equals 4.10. Okay? Saying that the core utils file has to be version 4.10, otherwise this will not install. And I don't know what version core utils is actually out of, it's just using some arbitrary numbers there.
Do you want us to change the required?
No, you don't have to. If you guys already typed that in, you can just leave it. Okay, so down here at the, on the install, the first thing we do is we remove our build root. Our build root is that top line up there, so it's going to build all this in temp. And it's going to use the name of the package dash build root as the folder inside temp when it does its build. So first thing we do is we make sure that that directory is empty. Next thing we do is we make a directory in there. So it's going to be temp, test, user local bin. So again, we're using an area that should be kind of safe, temp directory. You can, change your build root to be anything you want. Doesn't matter. And then we're going to copy myscript.sh into that user local bin file that we created, the directory that we created under temp. And that's where it's going to do its build. If it had to do any build commands, that's where it would do it. So under clean, we just go through and we clean up the RPM build directory again. And then the last couple sections here, the clean files and change log. Under clean, we clean up our mess again. Files, there's this command here, default attribute. That just says for every file that's in this RPM, the default attributes should be, you got file permissions, owner, root. So we're just going to say default, we're just going to default to root as the owner, root as the group. And then when we actually lay down the file, we give it an attribute of 0755, which should make it executable for root and read write for everybody else. And we put it in user local bin myscript.sh. Now, when we created the myscript.sh file a couple steps ago, we didn't make that script executable, right? It was just a text file sitting in our system. It wasn't executable or anything. What we're doing though is when we install this file onto our computer, is we're changing the attributes so it'll be an executable file. And then I also comment out the doc section because, single file, we don't have any documentation.
That would be executable by all of them, wouldn't it? As a file, that's read and execute, right?
That means everyone in the system can use it.
Because if you
Yeah.
read write, it would be 6.
Yeah, it's read and execute. You're right. All right. And then, the all-important change log, I went ahead and said that for version 1.0-1, this is just the initial RPM build.
I have found the change log of RPM very helpful when I'm looking for issues. It's a very cool thing to go in and see. I mean, basically, release log. What is the last change that was done? What are the last changes to this code? Yeah, problem.
So again, this is pretty straightforward, right, guys? And so, when you get home and you're sitting there on Monday and you're like, well, I could be at work, but I'm sitting at home because it's Labor Day and it's raining outside, you guys can keep playing with RPM and build something really fantastic. Like, take all the files in your home directory and make them into an RPM. There you
So
go.
what I was talking about, it's interesting you mentioned that. So the situation I was thinking of earlier is, for instance, let's say that I'm a user on a machine and I want a new window manager, for instance. But my system administrator, well, he's just, he's not a nice guy. He's like, no, I'm not going to install that. You just have to deal with motif. All right, but I want AfterStep, for instance. I can download, the tar GZ file from, whatever repository AfterStep is on nowadays. But suppose I want to make an RPM so that I could install that and manage that within my own home directory. So I'd have to have some way of configuring RPM so that I can manage my own packages within my own
You don't need to.
home directory.
Yeah. Just RPM 2 CPI, yeah.
RPM is installed, you can tell that here's your root when you install.
Yeah.
Oh, so you can say my home directory is my home directory.
But you got to remember that
Yeah.
Area executable is not standalone in your box.
Yeah.
Right?
Unless it's statically compiled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe one
Nothing
useful
is
way.
anymore except for
Yeah.
your
Like
discovery.
if you're doing any document publishing, right, or making banners or
Yeah.
slideshows or anything, chances are you don't like the fonts that came with your Linux box.
Yeah.
So you install a bunch of custom fonts from like the font or something like that. Some free website where you can get fonts. So one thing you could do is you could go and grab all those fonts, package them up as just custom fonts, 1.0 or whatever, And next time you reinstall your system, instead of downloading all the fonts again, you just install your custom fonts RPM.
Yeah.
And you're done. If Chris wants the same fonts you do, because he's like, hey, that Psycho font, that's really cool, I want that. You could give him your RPM and say, hey, it's in this RPM, and he could install it.
Yeah.
So, but then you probably sit there and say, I can't, Doug, I use that.
Chris likes to run multiple package managers at the same time on the spot.
See, I get my box working, I don't install anything else on it, I want it stable, I'm getting too old to like have an unstable.
Mine's stable enough, if I don't use it, it's very stable.
Yeah.
This is probably pretty obvious what they, attribute line there, and probably that provides permissions that user and group.
Yep.
I
tried to install it.
Permissions, user, and
Problem, I catch that, the guy installed it, running, but as soon as they add the
default attribute finding RPM.
Yeah, so if I don't specify an attribute, that's what it will make.
You only have one file, kind of
I only have one file, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no,
I want to throw that in
trying
the
to get some
second
format to it, but,
Yeah, I just want to throw it in there so I can talk about
Permission
it.
to confuse me into who the
Start
store, I
with
just not listing everything.
release the main file, something else that scanning what files you have.
Yeah.
Ah,
I said, we talked about that, so let's make it.
change.
Simple,
Same
same
thing
thing
works.
works.
Agreed text.
I mean, the last change was.
Yeah, change the language.
I mean, just last week was a big
All
change.
right, is everybody caught
The
up?
latest kernel update, whatever.
Everybody caught up?
5.2.
Yeah, we still don't like
Took
it.
out my X.
Oh, right, yeah.
No, we're not done yet, we've still got 10 minutes.
And I ended up having to go in kernel and
We can go over. We started late.
So,
All right, I have half an hour.
production